Okay, so my action research project was about how short-term test preparation would help students answer multiple choice, short response, and extended response questions better than previous data suggests. And what I ended up doing was I took two students from my class, and we did a 2-week intervention, which ended up being 10 days, in which I directly taught them reading strategies and test-taking strategies to see if they would show any gains from their practice test that they took, which was a simulated state test. So over the 2-week period, I alternated days. So one day I would teach a reading strategy with test-taking strategies in there. And then the alternate day I would teach listening comprehension and note-taking strategies. And over the course of the 10 days, I did notice that both students improved the accuracy of their questions when they were asked to complete multiple choice, and also when they were note-taking and doing listening comprehension questions. So at the end of this research, I realized that there were some limitations, one being that I only had 2 students, and then the other thing that I noticed was that I didn't really have a post-test. So initially, before I decided which skills I was going to directly teach my students, I had them do the practice exam. I item analyzed all their responses and figured out exactly, which skills, reading skills, they didn't know. And on the other hand, what I didn't do was, after I did the intervention, was to give them a post-test that was very similar in format and in administration to the practice test, to just see if they were, if the gains that they showed during the instruction would carry over into a simulated high-stakes testing condition. So that was pretty much what occurred. I kind of realized after the study that test preparation really should happen simultaneous to regular instruction. It should just be embedded in the curriculum. Unfortunately, this study was 2 weeks long, but we were only given 5 weeks to do the test prep with our kids, and only one period was allocated to this during the day. So because it wasn't embedded, it really was like we were putting all our eggs in one basket. And 5 weeks, I don't know if it will result in, improved scores on the state exams. Only time will tell. So, any questions?
Okay, so first question is, how come only 2 students were tested?
That's a very good question. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, because my school gave us the materials 5 weeks before the exam, they gave us a schedule in which we were supposed to, do the interventions with the students, and that time period was for 8 to 8:45. A lot of my students have really bad attendance, so they were either absent for that period, or they weren't present for the duration of the 2-week intervention. Other kids were excluded from the study because they did not participate in the practice exam. So since they didn't participate in the practice exam, I didn't really have data to show a before and after, and to get a clear picture as to the interventions that they would personally need. So that's why it only ended up being those 2 kids.
Okay. Then what reading strategies did you teach them?
Okay, so the ones that I focused on were basically tied into the results of their practice exam. So the things that I felt that they needed the most is the ones that I focused on. So I taught them how to read questions carefully. That was something that the kids really struggled with. they would read one question and it would ask them to do something very specific, and then they would interpret it as something very different. So, of course, they would end up getting the wrong answer. Then the other strategy was finding details and main idea. They would read passages and the comprehension really wasn't there. Like, they didn't understand what the key point of the passage was. So also I noticed that students weren't going back to find details. So when they had like a question that was one of those right there questions, if you go back to the text, the answer's right there, you don't really have to fish for it. They wouldn't do it. Like, they wouldn't go back to the text. They would try to do it from memory. And of course, some things didn't make it over, and they lost very easy points that way. So that was one of the strategies that I thought was very important. Another reading strategy was scanning the text, because once they were able to pick apart the question and know what was being asked, some of these questions had keywords. So what they would do is look for that keyword in the question and then like scan the text for that very same word to see if they could find the answer within it. So that actually was very helpful to them. Another one was, making predictions. That was another strategy I taught them, because I also noticed that sometimes they weren't really following along with the story, so by the time they got to the end of the story, they didn't know what was going on. So I thought that if they would make predictions along the way, and then it would be almost like a reading check for them to see if what they're reading is making sense. Because if you make an off-base prediction, then clearly you misinterpreted something. Something got lost. So that was one of the another reading strategy that I directly taught them. And another one was telling the difference between important details and unimportant details. That was huge, because when it came to extended and short response questions, like, they would almost be asked to like summarize, and they would put too many details in there. Like, it really didn't speak to the question itself. So just being able to like limit, the information that really wasn't, pertinent would help them to be more concise in their short and extended response, and also aid them in their note-taking, because they would only copy down or record the important facts that they heard and not just everything and try to do it verbatim, because they would lose time that way.
Okay. Then what about test-taking strategies? Which are the ones you chose?
Okay, so for test-taking strategies, one of the things that I noticed, my students, they receive extended time. So they get time and a half to complete their examinations. And even with that extra time, I noticed that a lot of my students weren't completing the exam. And I don't know, I kind of felt like it was a budgeting issue, like they weren't, taking heed of the reminders that we put on the board, where it would say, okay, there's 30 minutes left. They weren't really paying attention to that. They'd be lost in the test. So I felt it was really important that they had this awareness for time, and that they also were, aware of which type of questions required more time of them. So if you know that writing essays takes you more than an hour, then you need to allocate that time so that you can get through the test. Another test-taking strategy was answering the easiest questions first. A lot of the students, they lose their confidence when they're taking tests, when they feel like every other question that they're doing is taking them so long, they don't understand it, they get frustrated, and they would almost like give out. So taking the easiest questions first is a way to help build their confidence and, get their stamina going, and they can always come back to the harder questions later if they have more time, but it's more important to get more questions correct than to struggle in a few and you may not even get it correct. So that was just another strategy that I taught them. And there was another one. Okay. Yeah, the other one that I think was pretty important was highlighting the text, like marking the text. And that kind of went hand in hand with the reading strategy in terms of like finding main idea, finding supporting detail, being able to tell the difference between the two. A lot of times when the students would read the question, again, they didn't really understand what they were being asked, but I told them, underline the part that you think you're being told to do. What's the task at hand? And a lot of times also as they were reading, I asked them to put an SD next to supporting details so that way when you ask the question later on, you know exactly where to go in the passage to find that key information. So that was another strategy that I taught them. Any more questions?
Just one more. So do you really think the students are going to retain what you taught them, or do you think it's just a very short-term thing?
See, that's a very good question, because that's actually one of my personal concerns, because I really did my best within the 5-week period they gave me, and 2 weeks with the study, doing a more targeted intervention with the 2 kids. But I kind of feel like the retention is a gamble, because it is kind of like almost like a cram session we're doing with the kids, and it's like teaching them new skills at a very short period of time, and it's like the time they have to apply it is reduced now. In terms of like them doing it from September to now, they would have had several months practicing these skills in different contexts, and it would have been, I guess, more of a habit, or like a practice. But because it's like done in a hasty type of way, and they already have this pressure of the exam, I'm not really sure whether they'll retain it or not. Like, I hope that they will. Maybe that's something like a follow-up that I can do after the testing is over. Just, give them an assessment to see if those skills transfer over. So that's pretty much it. And that's actually one of my limitations as well in terms of the post-test. I really think that would show me if they are retaining those new strategies or not. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. You're awesome.